All right, welcome to everybody who's joined so far. We'll just give it a couple of minutes for people to join in, and then we'll get going. Welcome to everybody who just joined. We'll get going in just a moment here. All right. I think we'll kick it off and people can join as they're able. Welcome to everyone. Thanks for joining us today for Jellyfish's December deep dive. Today we're going to be talking about what's next for engineering in the age of AI. I know we've been talking about that a lot this year, but I always find this end of year, looking ahead to next year, is a great time to reflect on like where we've been and where we're going. Just by way of introduction, I'll introduce myself. Adam Ferrari. I'm an advisor with Jellyfish. I was a longtime customer. I've been a multi-time CTO, so been in your shoes, multiple times in the past, and work with the Jellyfish crew today. And today we've got a special guest, Melanie Ziegler from the VPE Forum. We were also, just a quick programming note, we were also supposed to have Andrew Lau with us, but we had a little bit of a scheduling glitch there. But I think today's going to be just as awesome as ever. We've got a ton, I think, great stuff to discuss. Especially, I'm super happy to have Melanie here as our special guest. Melanie has created and runs the VPE Forum. The VPE Forum is it's maybe not the biggest, most well-known engineering leadership forum, but to me, it's the best. I've been a participant there for coming up on a decade, and it's a really great organization, where, there's a pretty wide range of engineering leaders that participate in that. It's and we do regularly scheduled, meetings that are not just content, but they're highly engaged. Like we help, work on problems, and so it's a really great collaborative forum that Melanie's created, and that I know I personally value in my practice. Over time, it's been a great thing. But Melanie, maybe I'll hand it off to you to just say a few words about the forum and your background. I know you as a former engineering leader. I don't think anyone else could have created something so relevant for engineering leaders.
No, thank you, Adam. And thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here and having this conversation with you. So as Adam mentioned, I run VPE Forum, where engineering leaders, CPTOs, product leaders come together to exchange practical insights, strengthen their leadership, and solve hard problems faster. It's always about business outcomes. Founded VPE Forum in 2014, and we've had the privilege of working with close to 100 engineering leaders at some of Boston and beyond's top tech companies over the past 10 years. Our members encompass everything from startups to scale-ups to public companies. Forum members have included companies on the larger side like Toast and HubSpot, on the emerging and growth company side like Cloud Zero and Whoop, and we're fortunate to have Jellyfish's engineering VP count as one of our members as well.
Yeah, yeah. It's awesome. I think especially like that group being so engaged. I really value having you here today as we kind of like look ahead to what we're going to talk about today. You get highly engaged interaction with just a ton of really great engineering leaders. So I'm really glad to have you here today to share the aggregate perspective that you get from doing that. Because I think it's a really interesting moment in the industry, and all those perspectives are super valuable. So today we've got some good ground to cover. Like I said, it's this time of year when you tend to like look back where we've been, and also, of course, look ahead to the coming year. What do we think's going to happen? What are we planning for? And also, just the role of engineering leadership is evolving, changing very rapidly. So we'll talk about that. So we'll do a little bit of look back, we'll do a little bit of look ahead, and we'll talk about the changing demands of engineering leadership. We also just, please, as you've got questions, there's on the toolbar for the Zoom, there's the Q&A feature. So please use that. If you could put your questions there, it's going to be easier for us to find them than, going and like looking through the chat and stuff. I often find I miss stuff in there, especially when we're talking. So if you could put your questions in there, we'll definitely get some time at the end to talk through any Q&A discussion, places where people want to go deeper. So let's dive in. I'm going to actually just take us off the share so we can, this is just going to be a conversation. We're not going to slide you to death. We're just going to be talking. But we'll start with the first part, Melanie. We should dive in on adoption of AI that we saw in 2025, the year that's not quite over, not quite in the books, but it's getting close. And I remember going into this year thinking it's going to be a wild ride, and it hasn't disappointed. And I know some of the research we see at Jellyfish looking at adoption. We do an annual State of Engineering Management survey. We also were a co-sponsor for the Dora report, which is a pretty widely read, engineering leadership survey. It does really deep research in terms of engineering and DevOps practice. All signals tell us that like adoption at this point is fairly universal. It's 90+%, increasingly reflexive adoption, people using it in their day to day. It's been a wild ride in terms of what that adoption looks like. I know we do reporting on a regular basis in terms of the tools that people are using. Coming into the year, I would have said that like GitHub Copilot was the clear favorite. Through the year, we saw Cursor really surge, people, getting that more comprehensive native AI experience. And I think actually recently, like if I look at the trends, Claude Code is absolutely like the one that's really like, taking off. But meanwhile, there's a long tail. There's been also a ton of experimentation and not just on tools. It's also been a pretty wild year. When we say 90+%, there's a lot of variety that's hidden in that number. There's just been a ton of experimentation across use cases. So I think like when I look at the year behind us, it's definitely been the turning point of adoption. Definitely kind of an evolution from the Wild West to maybe people trying to productionalize, get to more, putting stuff into operational day-to-day practice. So I'm curious what because you again you talk to all these engineering leaders, like what have you seen in terms of adoption of AI over the last year?
Yeah, I mean it's been a crazy year, right? I mean, whirlwind is a minor word for it. And when you invited me to join in, and I'm like, well, what do I have to say? And then I look back at everything that's happened over the year, and I've seen all of our members do. I think you'd agree. I mean, over 2025 during this year, we've seen AI going from being a novelty, to being like a real utility. I think in my all my years, never mind this last year, all my in Forum, all my years in the industry, I think we've seen software development change faster than any prior, abstraction shift. And in our forum groups, every quarterly meeting, every monthly sync, every community event includes discussion and conversations on an AI. And I go, well, when does that happen? It didn't happen with microservices. It didn't happen with cloud computing. Um, I think the interesting thing, I'll just add one more thing on this section is the behavior shift and going from what I would say experimentation to expectation over a year. At the start of the year, our engineering leadership community had took on the perspective, well, let's let the early adopters poke around. Are we going to let them arm? Are we going to let them? But let's just let the early adopters, poke around. And then by the middle of the year, the engineering, in general, our engineering leadership community was saying, okay, I expect my people to try the tools and have a point of view. Is this helping us? Isn't it helping us? But try and make your own determination.
Yeah.
And at the end of the year, now where like AI literacy is mandatory, you know,
Yes.
and
Yes.
and metrics and ROI have started entering the conversation.
Yeah.
So, and I'd say like so the biggest shift hasn't been also just the tools, like but behavior. I think
Yeah.
engineers have finally trusted AI enough to start building with it, not working around it.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And but by the way, I like in terms of like that quick, I totally see like that change and how fast that happened. One of the funny little stats from the Dora report was that they looked back on the survey of when people adopted AI. It's actually they found that the median adoption date was only last year, April. So honestly, Like that happened so fast. We were only like a little bit more than a year into this for the average developer. And it did shift from kind of like dabbling to, you should be doing stuff to now like expectations. It's a good segue. I think the thing that's on everybody's mind is, okay, we're definitely doing it now. We're definitely, adopting AI in our practice. Like, is it working? Are we getting outcomes? It was actually kind of an interesting year in that, like, there was this report from Meter, this org that tracks frontier models and their capabilities, that kind of like if they did this study of open source development, and they found negative impact from AI introduction. And it was like there was a lot of reasons for that in the study. But meanwhile, like I think more broadly, there's a growing sense and there's a growing body of work that tells us that it is having an impact. Like for example, like at Jellyfish, we did a joint study with OpenAI. We looked at a bunch of systems data from your Git systems, and like we looked at that in relation to AI adoption, and it was a pretty incredible result. We found like as you moved from low adoption all the way up to sort of high full day-to-day adoption, you could see like a 25% reduction in cycle time for PRs, which is a pretty stunning impact. Even more than that, we actually saw in that data, for the absolute end of like what people could achieve, more than 100% improvement in throughput. So it's like kind of crazy results. And I saw that I was like, wow, is that real? But like, it does match anecdotes that you hear. And also like this showed up in the Dora report as well. We co-sponsored the Dora study this year, and they found also this year the impact on things like percent of time spent on valuable work, the throughput of delivery, those were highly correlated with AI adoption. So we're starting to see, I think, more and more body of evidence that it's having impact. I'm curious, like, what are like does that track with the because I think the truth is it's a spectrum. It's like if you talk to any one data point, good, bad, or indifferent, like you're going to get different answers. But like you see a decent sample set. Like, what are you kind of seeing in terms of are people getting impact? Are they able to discern that impact?
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, I mean, the answer is yes, for sure. Like you mentioned, like cycle time, and we know, we've always known that actually code development is only a piece of the entire
Yeah.
software
Yeah.
development cycle, and so with respect to cycle time, even if alone, like you look at prototyping, I mean, prototyping has become a superpower. What used to take weeks and quarters now can be done in days, and well, that's part of your cycle time. But from members of our community, I mean, words like force multiplier, smaller teams, teams of 30 to 40 acting like teams 2 to 3x that. We have some of our, I mean, community members at the leading edge, really seeing like 30 to 50% of committed code coming from agents or assisted workflows. I think that certainly tracks some of the reports that you guys have put out. The getting new people into the code, the learning curve,
Yes.
understanding new parts of the code has become pretty simple. Basic coding errors, not needing to make it to human reviewers anymore. I'll give you one example because I mean, I'll probably say this a number of times today is that I mean, real impact is about business results. And so one of our community members was telling us that now, instead of investing, or they used to invest heavily in upfront customer research and UX design, now they're just very quickly, very rapidly shipping working software. This is one of our larger companies too, so this isn't a 0 to 1. This is one of our
Yeah.
larger
Yeah.
organizations. So now they're just shipping really quickly. They're iterating quickly, and gave an example where they've went from nothing to a real number of live customers and substantial revenue in a relatively small number of months.
Yeah.
I mean that's impact, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of crazy how it's compressing like these timelines in some cases, especially where it's like it's a little bit more greenfield, or you've got a group that's maybe further along adopting it. I think the thing, by the way, I often find that when I'm in conversations like this and we're cherry picking like the good data points and the good statistics and the good anecdotes, it's worth calling out. Like one of the things we see from like for example Jellyfish customers that use our AI impact analytics is it's not magic. You don't just flip on the switch of these AI tools and suddenly you're getting that impact. It's actually a journey. I find time and time again, companies like they'll start adopting, like just throwing, getting the tools in place, maybe you might even see negative impact because people are now noodling around on the tools and or like, taking the output of tools and having to iterate that, like learning the practice. It takes actually some cycles. So like the results are out there. I think when I look at these positive results, they kind of tell me the art of the possible, not necessarily what you'll get on day one. So it like takes a little bit of fortitude to keep going. It's a good segue. It's a good segue into, I think one of the things too that I feel is emerging this year. You mentioned it, like it's the end-to-end sort of software development lifecycle. Like I think best practices are actually starting to emerge, and like some of the insights that Dora report, one of the more sort of to me profound observations was this idea of the AI mirror, the idea that if you put AI in an environment, it's kind of like a magnifying glass on your strengths and weaknesses. So it tells us it's not a magic pill that you just put in and now coding is free and everything goes fast. It's kind of more like you got to look and you have to look end to end at the entire engineering system. And if you have a bottleneck, if you've got really slow, build and deploy, guess what? Like pushing a bunch of AI generated PRs through that, it's only going to exacerbate the issue. So you've got to look there. I mean, the fortunate thing though is I think when we've seen good data evidence of leaders like putting AI in other parts of the process, like code review you mentioned before, like that's one where we've seen, I think, a lot of adoption. Something like 80%, I think, of teams are either using or experimenting with code reviews. So I think we're starting to see best practices emerge. I don't know, what do you, does that mirror what you're seeing from
Yeah,
people in the
no,
forum?
no, absolutely, absolutely. Like, we started out and it was all about just coding and speeding up the coding and what we think we've all learned now, right, is the real unlock is, AI sitting between like every stage of the life cycle. And so that starts with from talking to users to creating the product requirements documents and roadmaps like AI. At the tail end, doing the review, deploy, and measure, AI. So it's kind of it's everywhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, One of the things you also mentioned that I think was again, actually, when I look back on 2025, I was like, oh, it's been a crazy year. It's been chaos. But when you actually start to inventory some of the sort of achievements of the year that the industry had, I think
Hmm.
one of them was around measuring impact. Like you mentioned before, it's like, you're seeing members start to really measure impact. I think that one of the more delightful outcomes I saw over this year was there are a number of proposals. I mean, Jellyfish has a really nice write-up out about like a framework for measuring AI impact. Unsurprisingly, it builds on the fundamentals of measuring engineering productivity, things like the Dora metrics or the space framework. But like, you got to then consider like, how do I then bring in the data points of AI adoption and usage? And it's kind of nice. I saw like the proposals coming from different vendors and proposals out there in blog posts and whatnot. They tend to they seem to be converging on kind of a three-tier structure where you look at A, adoption, because if you don't have adoption of these tools, like how can you possibly have any impact? And then there's kind of a second order thing of productivity, like does it improve factors like PR cycle time or PR throughput? And then like you've been talking about, there's the business outcomes. Are we able to then allocate more of our investment to interesting work, to revenue generating work versus KTLO? Like there's those kinds of business impacts. So there's I think I've seen a nice convergence in terms of understanding how we measure this stuff. Maybe like not at quite, I don't, when I look across folks I talk to, it's not universal that everybody's fully measuring that end to end. But they're at least getting going on adoption. I'm curious, like what are you seeing like on average? Like where are people in terms of measuring this stuff?
Yeah, so it's interesting, and I'm going to take us a little bit back to the last section to go into this section. The thing in the second half, especially in the second half of last year, this year, the second half of
Yeah,
this
yeah.
I mean, the just the daily workflow transformation and AI being applied again across the life cycle, but first pass like code reviews. They're not peer review bots aren't perfect, but they enforce consistency, security patterns, catch of classes. That's one area. Automatically generating unit tests and integration tests. A lot of people are doing that, doing large scale, refactors that are mostly repetitive updates,
Hmm.
upgrading libraries and frameworks,
Yeah, yeah.
creating documentation. But as far as to name a few, and then also, as you said, and I think people are going to need to be, the bottlenecks are extra amplified, and clearly that's where people will need to will look for the most promising areas to put time in. But the the measurement. So it's interesting. So back in August, and I just always think about this. One of our members put out a poll to the community out on Slack, and said, okay, if you're doing measurements, what are you seeing? My measurements show a lift. B, my measurements do not show a lift. C, too confusing to draw conclusions. I mean, which one do you think had the most
Yeah.
votes?
I know the answer, but
And,
it's not surprising, right?
and then there were some people that voted all three. Yes, I see them. But but
But a lot of too confusing, right?
but I mean, with all the spend we're making, I mean, it's more critical, than ever. And as we end the year, I mean, that's the big topic, right? And people are putting energy into it. But like, I'm just reminded, like measurement is it's not like all or nothing. And starting small, incrementing, learning, just keeping the experimental mindset of understanding what the heck is going on.
Yeah, totally true. I think it's kind of like my best guess is that we kind of got to be moving in parallel, like being practical, like measuring adoption, for instance. It's kind of table stakes at this point. Like you should be looking at like, is your team using it or not using it? Are there teams that maybe are stragglers that you want to give some encouragement to kind of like adopt the stuff? But I think at the same time, it's probably moving fast enough where you have to be looking ahead at how to measure it end to end, even if you're not there today. So I think you're absolutely right. It's like you can't let perfect be the enemy of progress, but I think you also have to be looking over the hill a little bit of how you're going to measure this stuff because it is. I think the expectations have moved very quickly in terms of what you can get out of it and how it should be helping. Um, that's a good segue. Like, I think, you know, to me, when I see groups that are maybe a little bit more ahead in terms of measuring stuff, it is interesting that they have seen a change over time. And actually sometimes it's like, one step forward, two steps back, or, like vice versa. So it's interesting to watch over time. It tells me it's not, again, like it's not a magic pill that you just put in, it makes everything better. Um, but I think one of the fun findings from Dora this year was this is the second year that they've mostly focused on AI. Like 80% of the report or something like that was focused on the impact of AI. And this is the second year running. The cool thing about that was they're able to look at trends. And one of the trends they saw in the industry was that like on certain dimensions, like things had gotten better. So what they saw was, this is not a static, like, it's not like, oh, you get 30% lift from AI, like QED, it's done. No, it's a moving target. And actually, the whole industry is moving. So I guess maybe the first thing I'm wondering in terms of like when you look at what engineering leaders that you work with are expecting in the year ahead, are they expecting another productivity boost? Like, are they looking ahead to like we've gotten, especially people who are maybe a little bit more sophisticated, they've gotten gains. Are they going to double down this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer, yes, go largely across our community, and myself personally are expecting the boost. I mean, you just look at how far we came in 2025, and
Yeah.
like how could the same not happen in 2026? But I think, but sentiment across our engineering leadership community is that they expect in 2026 that AI assistance will be used, by the vast majority of engineers, because it's not 100% today, but be used by the vast majority of engineers in 26 and embedded across the entire software development lifecycle. And then the next wave, when that comes, feels less about isolated tools and more about like workflow level
Yeah.
automation.
Yeah, across the board. I totally agree. Like one of the things I think coming into 25, there was this feeling that like just the tools themselves were going to improve so much. The models kept getting like explosively better. And I think
Mhm.
like we've seen that like be a little bit of a mixed bag now. They are getting better, but like they're getting better in like not just an absolute. They're like, oh, that like, you look at GPT-5, it's like potentially better at like longer, more complex tasks, but it's also slower. So you're starting to run into that feeling where it's less of that like that Moore's law feeling of absolute advancement and more of a like, oh yeah, we're kind of at the frontier and there's trade-offs. But at the same time, I think like what you're saying is spot on. It's like it's not just the models and the tools, it's the end to end, and that's where we're going to get more sophisticated, and that's going to be the next unlock in terms of a step function.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I just haven't, I don't really feel like I've heard a lot of people even lately like talking about just improvements in the models. That isn't just that isn't really where people are focusing on right now,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
at least not the implementers.
yeah. The other thing that I think is out there in terms, so that's the end-to-end workflow and like looking at the whole engineering system and how can you AI, enhance all the different steps. I think the other thing that's very much on my mind when I talk to engineering leaders and what they're like experimenting with, but also if you just generally look at the industry, it's kind of this promise of more agentic development. Like you mentioned, like use of assistance is going to be universal. I think it is practically universal at this point. But at the end of the day, I have this feeling like you're like, okay, even if you're a human assisted with an AI and an IDE, it's only you're still just one person, right? Like the next stage of maybe like, a step function in productivity is like, can we have agents doing more significant work? There's use of agents. We've seen success stories, I think, on simpler tasks, stuff that's a little bit more constrained. But like, to me, I wonder if we're starting to see the advent of real success with agents on more significant tasks, longer tasks, complex tasks. And also, like, let's face it, I think that like people do agentic, they'll do this vibe coding concept on Greenfield, but then when you get into an existing code base, it's not as easy, and you can't just go in there and unleash agents and have them do real stuff. So I don't know. Are you seeing buzz about agents among the members?
Oh, that's a lot of stuff you just covered.
Uh,
But
Agents, call it agents.
but no, for sure, right? Some of our members are experimenting with agents, some are further along than others. What's really wacky is when I hear people talk about how much internal intelligence they're feeding into the engine,
Yes,
for the
yes.
context to make the agents successful. But so it's early, but some members are reporting wins. I'll give you a couple examples. So, and some on the smaller side, not obviously full life cycle, but her members was using AI to draft, validate, and stress test requirements and tech plans, taking that through with
Hmm.
and with the expectation that next year, those end-to-end tasks will be performed with like completely with just only human review instead of any human authorship.
Yep,
This
yep.
notion of like human engineers will more and more supervise and steer, right? Sort of as a
Yeah.
trend. I don't know about you, but like human engineers, well, I mean, like, that's just weird to even say that. Like, well, what kind of engineers are there? I don't have my head around human engineers.
Robot engineers.
I mean, another example, when automating, one of our members is talking about, without writing a single line of code, they go from using AI, they go from a ticket to creating the automated tests that are run to validate that the issue exists, and then continuing on to doing the code changes that complete the upgrade, and then running tests and iteratively, fixing, and then having AI do the full merge request and pass the
Yeah,
regression tests. Like,
yeah. Wild. You hit in that first example, you said a word that was like that I picked up on, which was about planning. And if for anyone who's used Claude's planning mode, it's
mm,
it's an awesome experience, frankly. And to me, it was like a little bit for me, that was a gateway to understanding this concept that's emerging. I think this is what you're alluding to when you're saying like feeding context into the engines. It's like this idea of context engineering that's pretty recent. I think emerged over the summer. But like if you use planning mode, you really get this sense. You're like, I'm not going to just one shot a prompt on a complex task and it's have an agent go and run off and like do a complex development task. Like I wouldn't do that with a human engineer either, right? Like it would probably be a dialogue. And also, I'd make sure that they had access to all the data and context and documentation of the history of like, well, why did we build this? How did we build this? What were the non-functional requirements? And I think like that's the example you get, those examples, they hint to me at like, I think where an unlock's going to come on the agentic front, which is around just a better sophisticated understanding of context engineering. And also like not just context engineering, but planning, this idea of spec-driven development, where it may not end up being purely like, okay, you have to specify like we are entirely focused on the spec and not at all on the code, but like having a plan of record that the agent is working on so that you can take it in steps, it can go autonomously and work on back in the background on some of the steps. I think it's like some of this memory and context and state of the project that we capture for the LLMs. It's honestly very reminiscent of like what makes, like a well documented code base and a code base where you're organized in terms of tracking work and stuff. It's just easier to work in for humans, never mind agents.
Yeah, I would like to jump in with, some of the challenges though, right? It's kind of
Yeah,
fictiony, but it's there's work to be done in for a lot of companies and a lot of
yeah,
ways, like because for many meaningful infrastructure improvements, will be
yeah,
necessary to enable the agentic workflows and it's like tech debt, and now it's AI debt, I suppose, like investing in the consistency of tools and processes, across teams. So some are teeing that up for
yeah,
some effort into 2026 because they'll just those are going to be important enablers.
yeah. This is very much mirrored in the Dora report. They had a whole section in there, like honestly, just some of the things you just spoke to. They
Hmm.
looked at the influence of AI, like getting your house in order, the AI success factors. It's things like, do you have a quality data platform? Like, do you have, quality platform support? Do you have, good ways of working? Do you work in small batches? Like some of those fundamentals they found were highly correlated with getting leverage out of AI. So I agree. I think there's a lot of back to basics in order to unlock it. Not just like sophisticated context engineering stuff for agents. There's a lot of environmental stuff that provably makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and also you mentioned brownfield at the start, and we can't forget that. I mean, not
Yeah.
everything is 0 to 1, right? I mean, there's just a lot of very complex, large systems out there that there's a good opportunity for some unlock with more effort and tools and practice.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that'll be a hallmark. Like if we see success on, in my mind, more complex tasks, because you hear a ton of success with like the small UI changes or implement a test
Mhm.
or disable this feature flag. Like I think we'll know we're seeing a sort of a sea change with agents. When the tasks become more complex, like a real end-to-end feature, sort of maybe back-end data model, front-end UI, like a more end-to-end, complex task. And then also where it's like you say, brownfield, it's like, at the end of the day, most things aren't 0 to 1. Like you say, it's living and extending and evolving a system. So I think when we see that, we'll know that like we've cracked the code on context engineering and et cetera to make agents successful.
So what do you think, Adam? Are we going to get the full agentic workflow in 2026?
I I I'll tell you how, I think I'm going to say yes. I can be wrong because this is like prediction time. There's no penalty to me if I'm wrong, other than you guys can throw tomatoes at me next year. But part of my calculus is just the pace of change this year was so fast and exceeded my expectations of what was possible. I mean, playing with AI at the beginning of the year, I remember thinking back and seeing some of the dumb errors it would make, and I was like, this is, people being like, oh, this is going to take over software engineering. I thought it was laughable at the beginning of the year. But I'll tell you, I've lived with it and I've done personal projects with it, and like, it's and I think you said something before about trust. I think engineers have developed a little bit of a nuanced relationship with respect to how they trust the output from AI. They don't trust it absolutely. Who would? It's like it makes mistakes. It still makes mistakes. But they also realize it's pretty damn good and it's better. The better the prompting, the better the context, right? The better the input, you can get it really good. So it's not like you're not going to review it or you're going to trust it absolutely, but like there's tons of value there. And I think that like so that happened over the last year. So when I look ahead, I'm like, I'm not going to underbet in terms of what's possible in the year ahead.
Yeah. Um,
So
I think very fair.
it's it's maybe a good transition. Some of the other things that I think are interesting for the year ahead. One of the things I've been wondering, like if you believe this, if you believe we're gonna reach more of a reliable, I think that's maybe the way to look at it is like 2025 was very experimental and we got promising results, but they haven't been systematized, right? Like they're not universally available to everybody, super well documented. And I think in 2026, maybe we'll see that change. In that event, like, there's been a lot of talk of like when do we start to measure the ROI of AI? Like, we're just experimenting, trying to get the lift from it, but nobody's looking at the spend. Are we going to see AI? Like you probably see this in terms of trends in terms of how engineering leaders are approaching planning this year. Are they starting to think from a financial perspective of not just the R, but also the I, like how much money they're putting into it?
Yeah, no, they are, and some of our members are sort of allocated fuel budgets to their engineering leaders, both for tool acquisition and for, for token spend. But I mean, engineering, I think in 2026 that we will see companies, engineering leaders focus on AI spend. I mean, engineering leaders, I mean, they should be accountable for AI spend just the same way they became accountable for cloud computing spend. I mean, now that we've shifted from, pure experimentation to implementation, I think, the executive teams, the CFO, the board are gonna demand it. I mean, we've certainly seen them, and costs can spiral quickly, if not managed. So yes, in short, I think there is going to be focus on this in 2026, and the executive team will be involved, and the CFO will be
Yeah.
involved.
Yeah. I think probably if I had to take a best guess on this year, it would be that we get our hands around it. Like I don't think we understand it well enough. And also the pricing models have frankly been in flux and also they're complicated APIs versus tokens and all the different like, it varies across tools. So like I think maybe this year, and also let's face it, as you put AI in other parts of the process, like I mentioned planning, I mean planning can churn through some tokens, like don't kid yourself. So it's like one of these things where I think maybe this year we'll at least be able to get our hands around it, like get a handle on the cost, and then I think maybe we'll start to see practice emerge around managing it.
And
But again,
follow.
things have gone faster than I've ever expected. So
No,
maybe there's even more progress than that
but
ahead.
I think because of the speed at which things are moving, that makes it even more challenging to then be able to get to manage and get one's arms around it.
Yeah,
So I think it moving in that direction and the conversation is deepening. Or I think you're probably right where 2026 will be, but people are starting to talk about it.
yeah,
It's always the
yeah,
first step.
yeah. It also, I think one of the other interesting questions for 2026, I'd love to hear your impressions on. Because like you get once you get into this budget space, you start thinking about also the hiring budget, and we've been in a weird space in tech in the last couple of years with, much lower rate of hiring, much more incidents of layoffs occurring. Some of it's been kind of hung on AI, like AI replacing jobs, and I don't think it's none. I mean, there's definitely instances where layoffs have been at least from the company's perspective, ascribed to doing more with AI or expecting efficiencies from AI. But I mean, I think there were a lot of other factors, like we're coming out of a kind of a complete shift in the financial environment. So hiring's been weird the last couple of years. At the same time, like so you start to worry. Like I know it's a pretty normal conversation. People will ask me, just given that I'm in the field, they're like, "Hey, is computer science a good major for my kid? Like, are there going to be jobs in that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I guess what? AI is made out of code. It's I think there's going to be if they love it, that's always the big if. If you love software engineering and computer science, it's a great field. I think it's not going to go away. But you do get this concern where you're like, if we're not hiring the next generation, where's the talent pipeline going to come from? So like, I wonder if we're going to start to see the hiring environment improve in 26. I kind of cautiously think the signals are yes, but I'm curious what you say.
Yeah, I hope so.
I
Um,
hope so
I,
too.
I mean, I suspect it'll vector in that direction. Will it completely normalize? No, I mean, 2025. I mean, I think you're right. This is it's been a heck of a few years in
Yes.
our industry. And I think for many, 2025 was a bit of a wait and see year. I mean, the economy, the fundraising climate. What will AI do and not do to productivity? Should we be
Yeah.
shrinking our teams? But I think things are settling down, or maybe they're just settling down for me. But I think things are settling down.
Yeah.
I think people are accepting that we're in this environment of they're accepting that the environment is one of constant change and
Yeah.
understanding more that developers still fit in the equation of delivering product. What I can say, for like real data, right? That was my I suspects I thinks. I see signs. But what I can say is that there are several companies across our community that are hiring, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
exciting. I'm also starting to see to hear companies bringing interns back. I mean,
that's super encouraging, by the way.
huge because for so many years, we can name all the programs that had the internship programs, but we haven't been talking about them the last few years. So companies are starting to bring interns back. That pipeline matters. Interns are naturally going to grow into full-time hires. I was thinking about this and like I'm actually, those had said, less worried about the outlook for college students than the kids that have graduated this year and last year. But I have a little anecdote on that too, because so my son, not a comp sci, was a 2021 class grad, and so he has a number of friends on comp sci, and while they weren't, and a few of them have been hired as interns, whereas normally they would have been hired as in a full-time
Yeah,
position. They're being hired as interns even as college grads, so that'll give us the pipeline.
yeah,
I'd say is that the encouraging part on the fresh outs is simply that like the conversation is back on the table. Like how
yeah,
are we going to get senior engineers if we don't train them and grow them into them? And so that's
yeah,
encouraging.
yeah. As long as we don't have any kind of crazy disruption from the quote unquote AI financial bubble. I know every time the NVIDIA earnings report
Mhm.
comes out, it's a white knuckle for all of us to see whether
Yeah.
the economy is going to explode because of this strange structure of the finances of that market. Um, but yeah, the hirings, and maybe that's a good transition to our kind of our last area I wanted to spend some time on, which is the changing demands of the engineering leadership in this AI era. I think on the one hand, like I've mentioned in the Door report this idea of AI as a magnifying glass on your organizational strengths and weaknesses. One of the kind of the delightful sort of corollaries to that is like all the stuff we were doing already, as engineering leaders to create a good developer experience and create a healthy, engineering environment. Like there, it's this validation that all has also, equal, if not greater impact in the AI, environment. So it's everything from platform engineering, developer experience, documentation, like all those investments, they pay off on AI. So there's a part of the engineering leaders. I think we've seen a lot of validation in the last year that like, hey, the core stuff that you've been thinking about and implementing, it's as valid as ever. At the same time, like per this conversation around hiring, it's unquestionable that there's also changes. Like you have to have an AI program. Like you have to be maybe starting to adjust your thoughts around like, does the org structure flex a little bit with AI? If a team, you mentioned at the very beginning the ease with which you can onboard into a new code area. So
Mhm.
does that maybe make us a little bit more fungible in terms of like, areas of ownership for teams? So I mean, I think actually just the basic management and operations of an engineering team are going to evolve. Are you seeing trends there from the members in terms of how they're thinking about that?
Yeah, well, one of the interesting things is that I mean, the engineering leaders now they're all being hands-on with AI. Even
Yes.
those who manage the largest teams, and they aren't doing that, putting themselves on the critical path of delivering product. But they're all hands-on, staying current so that then they can decide what matters. Engineering leaders are being called upon to be strategists across the company, across the various orgs and functions. I've always been an advocate for, product and engineering being joined at the hip. And I'd say this has never been more important than it is now.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I don't really know where the roles and functions, how they're going to get defined, where that's heading. I don't really feel like I have a good read on it, but just staying in lockstep and working more closely together is important.
Yeah.
Operations, higher attention to reliability and security. You mentioned the Wild West. So
Yeah.
those are some of the things I'm seeing. How about you, Adam?
Yeah, the strategy thing is definitely super interesting. It's like at the end of the day, this is probably the biggest technology transformation we've ever seen. So like the need for the engineering leader to show up and help make sure that company strategy is informed about like where the technology is going, which gets to your point about like, being engaged, being hands-on. If you've got a technical background, like honestly, co playing with these coding tools is delightful. Like, if you're just rusty on the coding, your technical chops are still under there. Like, but now you don't have to worry about the details of looking up the right current library for that particular thing. It'll do it for you. It's super fun, but it also get you kind of engaged with what the feel of these models is and what they can do and what they can't do. So that's super important. I also think, by the way, just general management practice, like it's equally, AI is equally helpful to the engineering leader. I mean, I know for me, like just being able to crunch large amounts of information, like for instance, like, if you've got years of, say, voice of customer tickets, like, and you want to summarize that and categorize that, like, AI is a power tool for that kind of stuff, or even just analytics, like, having AI can be like your junior analyst if you want to like look through like in a Jellyfish, like a ton of engineering metrics and find if there's any anomalies or concerns, right? Like Jellyfish built an MCP server to make those analytics available to the models. That's like a management power tool, like because you didn't have the time to necessarily dig through all those, analytics, but an AI can. So like that should allow you to go deeper. So I think there's practical day-to-day, there's strategy stuff, and there's day-to-day stuff that it probably informs.
Yeah, the expectations are clearly rising for, engineering execution
Yes,
ability,
100%. Yeah, that's the maybe the dark side of that everything's going so fast is we expect everything to go so fast.
right?
Um, it's maybe that's that probably maybe the last topic I wanted to hit on was just like 2025 was I like to joke, I was like 2025 was a really amazing decade because it just felt like that much change. It's a little bit exhausting for the team, but also for the leader themselves. I mean, what are you seeing in terms of leaders helping to navigate their teams? Like, we got to keep people engaged and in the fight and stuff like that. And right, it's exciting. Some days I'm like, wow, this is crazy and amazing. And then some days I'm like, wow, I'm exhausted. I can't keep rewiring my brain every day. So it's
No,
like it's hard stuff.
no, change fatigue is real, right? If I might, I just happened to read one Jellyfish blog. I guess on that with something I want to share, right, on change management. So it's always about change management, and in the
Mm,
Jellyfish blog, I'll quote, providing teams with the necessary training, allowing them the breathing room to overcome the startup costs and challenges. Identifying the power users within the org. All critical
yeah,
parts. But I think, leading with, providing clarity, not certainty, is an important skill these days.
yeah,
Leading with, honesty and partnership. We're all in this together. Staying, encouraging experimentation, and curiosity, celebrating wins, and then back to something I said in the earliest. Stay focused on outcomes, right? It's not activity. It's outcomes. So
yeah.
those are some of the skills I think, um, keeping teams going.
Yeah, I totally agreed. I think like it's in a way it's a bit of a torture test for authenticity. Like I know for me, I tend to be an optimist, so I may come off like as like, hey, this AI stuff's amazing, and like I think it's a moment where you also have to listen to the concerns. It's also not magic, and it also really does require some wrangling and some adoption of intentional practices to make it effective. So I think it's a moment where like when I hear about the heavy-handed mandates, I'm going to performance manage you to like using it. It doesn't feel to me like that's going to be as effective as being like, hey, this is really promising and the whole industry is transforming. It's our opportunity to, engage in that, be part of it, you know, reap the benefits ourselves. And so like, make sure that people feel that the upside and the positivity of it rather than the, being a heavy-handed mandate.
And take vacations.
And take vacations also still like no 997. Maybe if you're in the Bay Area, but um, well, that's great. We covered a ton of ground. I definitely want to make sure we had 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. Let me poke over there so I don't have any questions in the Q&A yet. Um, if anyone's got questions, if they want to pop them in there, or if you I don't know if there are any in the chat. I'll go peek in the chat. But we're happy to field questions, talk more about um, any of these areas. Thank you, Gail, who's been posting some of the links to some of the stuff we mentioned. Um, just generally, by the way, the Jellyfish blog, there's a ton of great resources on there. So I'll put my plugins into there. That one of the nice things is we see a lot of data from engineering systems and can kind of pull some of these interesting aggregate observations about what's happening. So it's just some good stuff in there.
Yeah, I think you know, I think it's just so important for people to be talking to people and leaders to be talking to leaders and learning from each other. I mean, this pace of change is just so quick.
Yes.
Nobody can keep on top of it by themselves. So,
Yes.
finding people that you could really share with, share successes, learnings, problems, challenges, is good for everybody.
Yeah. I thought it was really nice. We did so we like I mentioned, we co-sponsored the Dora research this year. And so we did recent last month's deep dive was our guest was Nathan Harvey, who runs Dora. And he made a great comment, related to the median adoption being only last April. And he's like, you may feel, given the pace of change, that you're behind, but it's not, it hasn't been that long. You're not that far behind, and it's natural to feel like sort of behind in something that's moving so fast, but it's still very new. So like, you're not really behind if you haven't fully figured it all out yet. Nobody's figured it all out yet,
Absolutely.
or very few. I think there's always those funny trailblazers who just like, they latch onto it and they kind of help paint the possibilities. I think you mentioned a couple of those examples, which in my mind I know the de-anonymized sources for at least a couple of them, and they're those trailblazer personalities who are showing us the art of the possible.
Yeah. So Jim Cuff jumped in with
Oh yeah,
asking
there we go.
current budget ranges for tools. Jim, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I'd be glad to get you some of that information and share it with you offline. Adam, are there any?
I don't have a good I don't have an off the top of my head answer there. And I've seen like pretty wild ranges in terms of so there's the tool license itself, but then there's some of the capacity like the token costs.
Right.
Like I talked just as this is one random data point. I talked to one individual who had placed a this sounded crazy to me, but then I'm like maybe that's reasonable. They had placed a limit of 1,000 per month per developer on token costs. I was like, wow, that's incredibly expensive. That's a lot of expense. But what he said was he's like nobody's hitting that. Like we rarely hit that. He's like, I just put that in so that I would have like a sense of like, are we bumping into that and get that alert and know who the crazy power users who were really burning through a lot of token costs. And he even said like if they hit that, I'll raise the limit for them because I want to keep them cooking, right? Which
Mm,
is great. I thought that was a great comment. Like keep them cooking. But so he's just trying to understand it. So I think that those variable costs, like I've seen some of the distributions on a team where there's like, the trailblazers will be burning thousands of dollars of tokens, and then, you know, it's
right.
much more modest cost. I kind of don't think that we're going to end up there from a cost perspective as we get smarter about and the tools like Anthropic just released some better tools integration that doesn't churn through quite as much tokens. It makes better reuse of the embeddings and stuff that are in your context. So like
Hmm.
there's going to be stuff like that that optimizes. So I don't know that I don't know that I've got a good guidance at this point.
Hmm.
But it's a great question. Yeah, 500 to 1,000 per developer in the budget. Yeah, that sounds pretty reasonable. If you think about getting tens of percent or like, if we keep going forward, if you start getting like 100% throughput improvement, it's actually it's a great deal, really, when you break it down.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Any other questions we could field?
I
Um,
guess we just covered so much ground, right?
Yeah, we covered too much ground. There you go.
We're really
Um,
short
well,
limit.
I wanted to. I don't know if you got any parting thoughts, but Melanie, I wanted to thank you so much for joining me for this. I thought I thought it would be an interesting conversation. We'd be able to cover a lot of ground, and in my mind, it delivered. I was fascinated to hear some of the examples that you got from the VPE forum.
Yeah, yeah, thanks, Adam. No, I think, if there's one thing, take people away is for people to take away is, we don't need all the answers. I mean, stay curious, stay honest, focus on outcomes, experiment,
Yeah, yeah.
and we'll
I
see where
think
we are, and we'll see where we are a year from now.
I think it's going to be probably a wild ride. I when I sat back to think about this, I was like, oh yeah, I think 2026 is going to be as crazy as 2025 was. I think 2026 is maybe going to be even more transformational.
Yeah. All right,
Well,
Well,
that's
well,
awesome. And thank you all for taking some time joining us. It's a pleasure to be with you all and talk about this fun and interesting stuff and continue this journey. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
yeah, thank you, everybody.